Hi there again, Mike Gehring back with you today to talk about living life backwards. This was on the list as you do business and life backwards, acquiring problems instead of solving it, acquiring problems and then solving the problems instead of solving the problem and then acquiring it. This is a fundamental flaw in most people's thinking. And it starts early. You have to teach kids. You have to think before you act. You have to think before you act. You have to think before you act. And the thing is, you get out, you get 18, you get 15 in my case, you get to 20, you get 24, you get out of college, you get into real life and nobody's around to tell you you have to think before you act anymore. You get all the basic stuff like I have to think before I touch the stove. Is the stove hot? Or you get all the stuff, I have to think, hey, I'm going to need clothes tomorrow before tomorrow comes and I need clean clothes to wear. You get all the basic stuff, where you learn to think before you do it, but you don't get the complex stuff. If, for instance, teenagers struggle with, they get into a relationship and they get it hot and heavy into making out, and then they go, well, now I want to have sex, but I was going to wait to have sex until I was married, or I was going to wait until I was at least with the person I wanted to marry, or whatever, and they don't think about the problem that they're creating by making out before they get to the making out. Education. We do the same thing in education. Well, I got a 4-year degree in philosophy or English, and that doesn't translate into the kind of money that I want to make in a job. Or we do the same thing in business, where we have capital to invest, and we go into the business, we get a business partner, and we don't think about, hey, these guys weren't working every day before we got into business. Now they're not working every day after we got into business, and we're losing money hand over fist. You have to figure out, you have to think about the problems that you're creating before you acquire them. They say in real estate, you don't make money when you sell. You make money when you buy. I say the same thing in the stock market. You don't make money when you sell stocks. You make money when you buy stocks. You make money when you buy stocks and when you buy a house by thinking about the problem that you're acquiring, calculating your return on investment, at that price, at that cost of investment, and figuring out what problems you're going to need to solve along the way, whether it's brokerage fees or real estate transaction fees or taxes or whatever. And then you hang on to it until you get the value that you want out of it, and then you sell it at that pre-planned price, and that gives you your return on investment. In business, when you focus on the marketing and you focus on the sales, then you focus on doing the work, then you focus on the accounting and the taxes, then you focus on the follow-up to manage your reputation. When you think about the problems that you're acquiring beforehand and you solve the problems that you acquire beforehand, then you don't have to worry about it afterwards. You do the same thing at the bank when you buy a car. Most people never consider this. When you buy a car, like we talked about in an earlier video, because the perceived value, the extrinsic value, is greater than the real value, as soon as you drive it off the lot, you lost 60% of your value. But you still have a loan on the car. Well, what happens if you get in a car wreck? Well, I have insurance for that. I have auto insurance for that. Well, that's great. That'll fix the car. Let's say the car is totaled. You're not going to fix the car. Now what? Now the bank will pay you the value of the car in its intrinsic value, but they're not going to pay you the perceived value that you paid for the car. You get gap insurance for that. Most people don't talk about that. Most people don't know about that, and most people don't buy gap insurance. So they get stuck in holding the bag of this thousands of dollars when they get their car totaled after they drove it off the lot. If you think about the problems that you're going to need to solve before you acquire the problems, then once you have the problems, then the problems can be solved easily because you already knew you were going to have the problems and solve them. That's why you get bumper-to-bumper warranty on a vehicle, because there's going to be problems on it and everything breaks down. And if you get the warranty, then you don't have to acquire those problems when you acquire the car. Happens in relationships. Well, you get married, you've got kids, and she's got kids from a previous relationship, and your expenses are going to go up, and both of you are only the thing that you have to consider as particularly in relationships, is that everybody has a thermostat. Everybody has a setting where they're comfortable at a specific level or lifestyle. And if you can't maintain that comfort level, what happens is then people go into workaholism because they can't maintain their standard of living. So they work all the time to maintain their standard of living, or they move into a neighborhood that's the cost of living in that neighborhood is higher than their income. So they get into that neighborhood, and now they're miserable because they can't keep up with the Joneses. Their thermostat isn't set at the same level, or their income isn't set in an equal level with their thermostat, so they get into problems that come from it. You see it a lot in men, middle-aged men, older men who have kids, and I find out kids are like plagues sometimes. I was talking to my kids one time, and I said, look, you need to understand that you create problems just by existing. Just by existing. Everybody does. We all do. I wasn't like picking on them. I probably could have said it a little bit kinder, but the fact of the matter is that just you're taking up space creates a problem. And just the fact that you're going to need to sleep someplace every night, and it creates a problem. You're going to need to eat something every day, creates a problem. You're going to need clothes to wear, creates a problem. Everything that exists creates a problem. Hopefully everything that exists solves a problem. And we were all created to solve problems. But when you think before you act, not just think about the consequences for you personally, but about how those consequences affect the people in your life. You see this a lot in young people. They want to get married, and then they don't realize that their life affects the lives of the people around them, and you know, the ones that do invite a whole bunch of people to the wedding, and the ones that don't end up having to fix relationships that got bent out of shape. People got bent out of shape because they didn't get invited to the wedding. I think, this is just my personal opinion, I think every time there's a wedding, you should invite everybody. Just everybody. Just plaster it on Facebook. Invite all the senators and congressmen and politicians and everybody, because politicians and representatives, because they don't know who they know. They're going to send you a gift because I don't know this guy. How did he get my number? But you might get a free gift out of it. But you should invite everybody. You should invite everybody, not just because of the free gifts, but because it makes the people that you do invite feel like they're important to you. And if you get a free gift out of it, great. If you get a relationship out of it, I have a friend. I've been friends with him for 10 years. He asked me to be the best man in his wedding. I didn't even know we were friends like that. I told him that. I was like, I had no idea I had meant anything to him, and then I got invited to be the best man in his wedding, and and that grew into an awesome friendship. When you think about the problems before you acquire them, then you can solve them before you acquire them, and then you don't get stuck with problems that you can't solve. And when you live life properly like that, when you make money when you buy instead of when you sell, then you don't end up with a lot of surprises, a lot of, oh crap, what do I do now? That people get into a lot of times, both in business and in their personal life, and it makes life a lot simpler. When you don't think about the problems that you're trying to solve thoroughly, even it creates problems for you down the road. It's the difference between buying a $20 pair of shoes and an $80 pair of shoes. You're going to need shoes. You don't walk around generally without shoes, hopefully. And if you solve the problem at an $80 level, hopefully you've solved 4 times the amount of problem than you would have solved at the $20 level. The shoes will last longer. You won't have as much pain in your feet if you're on your feet all day. You won't have the back problems that come from running in a crappy pair of shoes on concrete. You won't have you'll have better style. People will compliment you more on your choice of shoes. It might turn into your favorite pair of shoes because you didn't know shoes could feel that good. But you've got to realize when you're solving the problem that you're solving the problem that you're solving is a continuous problem. Most of the problems that we solve are a continuous problem. If you go out and you get a job, okay, you've created problems. You now need clothes. You now need transportation. You now need a whole bunch of things that if you'd have planned ahead, you'd have. When you go to college, you're going to want to go to college to acquire a higher level of pay from a job that you love than you would have gotten without having the skills and knowledge that an education gives you. But if going to school to become a social worker doesn't make you a millionaire, then don't go to school to become a social worker, or don't get a degree in philosophy or English when what you really want to do is engineering. There's and in business it's the same way. If you want to have huge potential in a business, then you need a better system than most franchises will give you. If you're not looking for a stepping stone, then you want to create something on your own. Most of the people that own McDonald's own more than one McDonald's. They didn't get into owning a McDonald's to own more than one, typically, but they found out that owning one McDonald's isn't as good as owning 3 or 4 McDonald's is. So that's part of the thing. They didn't think about it beforehand, so they didn't solve all the problems adequately that they acquired before they acquired the problem. I told you in an earlier video about I bought a piece of real estate in a nice end of town, a half an acre, in a good neighborhood, but it was a dumpy house. I didn't buy that house until I found out that I could get sewer. And if I had bought the house, and I would have acquired the sewer problem, and then had, how do I solve that? $30,000 sewer problem. So if I was going to put $30,000 into the sewer, it's more than the value of the real estate was after I fixed all the other problems. So when you, like I said before, 40-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 80-year-olds, they need to hear this just as much as 2-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 8-year-olds need to hear it. You've got to think things through. You've got to solve the problem acquire before you acquire the problems, and know what you're getting into by thinking before you act. And this will come close to time on, but it's a big deal, and it'll make your life a whole lot better if you think things through and solve the problems first. We on the next video we're going to talk about how you're bad at math, and that's why you're terrible with money. That's why there's a no bottom in your bucket. One of the cool things about math, it's one of my favorite subjects. It has its own alphabet, it has its own language, and if you learn the language and you learn the alphabet, then you can have a better life. You've probably heard somebody say, well, I think if they come over here, they should at least learn the language. They should at least have to learn the language, right? Well, you're using money every day, and chances are you don't know the language. So we're going to talk about that on the next video. My name is Mike Gehring. I hope to see you on the next video, and I hope you get a lot of value out of this.